Meanwhile, a video has emerged of Rishi Sunak boasting to Tory members in Tunbridge Wells that he diverted funding from deprived urban areas to places like the wealthy southern town. Jane Deeth has more on the cost of living crisis from one of the most deprived areas in Leicester.
Leicester is a city with a tradition of hard work and making do. People are used to finding ways to make ends meet. But here and across the country, that's becoming more and more difficult. Figures today from the ONS show just how many Britons have been making cost of living cutbacks. Between March and June, 24 million adults, that's half of the adult population, used less gas and electricity. 19 million, that's 42%, started cutting back on non-essential journeys in their cars. And more than a third had to go even further. 16 million people have been cutting back on food and essential items. St Peter's Church in Leicester does hot dinners several days a week. It means people can save on the cost of buying and cooking a meal. Jennifer says she tries to make savings, but on a pension you can't always afford to do a full shop.
Some people go to the food bank and some don't want to go because they're ashamed of it, thinking people is going to judge them, but nobody's going to judge them going to the food bank.
And have you had to do that?
Oh, I've been quite a few times. Let's put it that way. And share it with my friends as well.
Mahesh says he might not go hungry this winter, but he will have to ration the heating.
They say you choose between eating and heating, which is very true. It's going to be a choice. Do you put food on the plate or do you put the heating on? You know.
Do you think that's a choice that you will have to make?
I think food-wise will be okay, and if we be careful with how much we use gas and electricity, we might be okay, but it's going to be a struggle.
Marva took on this job a few months ago when she couldn't afford her own bills. With a husband and 5 children at home, they're high.
£164 for my gas and £163 a month for my electric.
So over £300 a month?
Yeah, £327, yeah.
And can you find that kind of money?
Most months I struggle to find it, but yeah. It has been, just lately it has been a struggle because my children are still at home, even my grown-up children are still at home. And for them, it's cheaper for them to be at home because
they can't afford
to move out anymore. Yeah, I'm also telling my kids stop charging their phones, like when they're on it, turning the lights off, and when it's really, really dark. Well, sometimes I don't even put the light on in the living room because, like, don't need it. And plus it's so expensive.
Tomorrow night, St Peter's will give out free hot meal parcels, something which started during COVID, but in the cost of living crisis is now a lifeline for around 80 families.
We're going to see a hard winter that in many ways for some areas will be far harder than COVID ever was. We all felt we were going through COVID together, and so there was a pulling together. This is very different. You know, this is people going, we can't cope. So far anyway, there doesn't seem to be the rallying around from government to go, we will help you out, we'll bail you out in these situations.
We don't know who will be the Prime Minister during the coming recession, but candidate Rishi Sunak has had to explain a video from last week telling an audience in Kent he diverted funding away from areas just like Leicester when he was Chancellor.
Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone.
This is what he said today.
And people who need help and extra investment aren't just limited to big urban areas. You find them in towns across the United Kingdom and in rural areas too. And that was a point I was making, that our funding formulas that fail to recognise that are out of date and they needed changing.
Rishi Sunak says he'd remove VAT on energy bills. Liz Truss says she's the one to help struggling families.
That's why it's very important that we reverse the national insurance increase, that we have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to help people with their fuel bills. But the most important thing is getting the economy going so we avoid a recession.
The Bank of England says we should be prepared for a recession which will last until the end of 2023. This year and next could be some of the hardest millions of us have ever known.
Jane Deeth there. Well, tonight, Liz Truss